I read Carlos Castaneda back in the late 60s, early 70s. Was fascinated by all the drug experiences, the magic and everything, and didn't really know how to apply it to my life very well. It was outside of the realm of the life I was living, even though I didn't inhale, but I did know what was going on out there. And so I ended up kind of just culturally seeking and trying to understand life and myself, and not very deliberately, but wondering all the time, and had a lot of different things I did. I was a commercial beekeeper and landscaper and things that just were passions, and I just took them on and made businesses out of them, and then stopped, and passion burned out, did something else. And around the 1990, I started thinking, it's time to quit lugging big rocks around as a landscaper and getting stung all the time, the things I was doing with bees. And so I decided I needed a career for the 90s. And I saw an ad for hypnotherapy trainings and the possibilities of hypnosis. So I ended up doing that and doing a training, and for 10 years had a practice in Santa Rosa as a counseling hypnotherapist, and really loved it. And it gave me an opportunity to go very deeply, first of all, with a lot of sessions in my own mind, tracking all the different agreements and beliefs out of my mind, reasons I did things that I said, why did I do that? I didn't want to do that. I didn't intend to do that. I didn't mean to do that. I was going to be specific, but I won't. And then 5 years into that, I got introduced to Miguel Ruiz. Very much like why some of you said you're here. Well, somebody met him and said, come on, and I'm going, and why don't you go with me? And so I went, and I was immediately struck that this was a possibility that I didn't know about yet. And I signed up right away. I was in. And he was teaching in Sacramento about once a month, coming up from the Southern California area, and I just was going. Just people's living rooms. It was a small group. It was before he wrote the books, and so there were maybe 20, 30 of us at a time just camped out on somebody's floor and sending out for burritos for lunch and hanging out with Miguel Ruiz for a long weekend. And it was really a gift. And then 2-3 years into that, he wrote the 4 Agreements, and it took a while to catch on, but boy, things got bigger and bigger, and we couldn't do living rooms anymore. But by that time, he had discovered the magic of Teotihuacan, the pyramid complex that the Toltecs built in Mexico, outside of Mexico City. So he was taking groups there, and the groups went from us 30 to 50, 60, 70, 80 people. And so pretty soon he said, you guys have to start teaching with me. I can't handle this. And he said, who wants to teach? And we're sitting in the room in Teotihuacan. And he says, which of you guys that's been with me wants to teach me? I went, but I already had the practice. I was already edging in that direction. So we all ended up. He said, okay, that if you have your hands under your leg, you're volunteering. Anybody without their hand up is a volunteer. So I found myself out in the middle of the pyramids with a small group of people. He would lecture in the morning and then send us into the pyramids. He was 5 or 6 day adventures in the pyramid complex. And so I started just doing it and winging it, and it worked. And then within a few years I started taking my own groups, and after 10 years I dissolved myself of that personal apprenticeship because I figured it out. I figured out there was nothing to figure out. I figured out that I was so busy trying to get what he was teaching me instead of accepting what he was reflecting back as who I truly was. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Because this was a man that was so clean that even if I was sitting in the front of the room taking notes and, oh, good point, I'm a counselor, you nailed that, that kind of thing. He never looked at me and went, all right, you're special, you get it, let me just talk to the rest of them. All of my strategies that I learned as a child and boy growing up to get it right, to be able to have the right answers, all of that just didn't work. But he would look at me, and he would see me, and he would smile, but not at me, or not because I was getting it right. He just smiled because he was loving me. And the love he was loving was the acceptance of all of me. The facade, all the strategies, all the trying to get it right for Dad was going off. And then so he saw that, and then he saw behind that, he could see the divine perfection that I was as a human being, my soul, my beauty. And he was seeing all that at once as a package and reflecting it back to me in the acceptance of that without any, oh, Alan needs to work on blah, blah, none of that. Just the reflection of that. And I was so busy making sure I was getting it right for Dad that it took me a good long time to get it, to figure out that that wasn't the point. There was never a pop quiz. I used to sponsor him at lectures and bring him up to Santa Rosa. And he'd be on stage, and he'd be talking, and he'd pretty much wrap up a conversation, and then he'd say, are there any questions? And people would have their hands up, gesturing for questions. He'd say, Alan, and I'd step up on stage, he'd hand me the microphone and sit down. That's one of the ways he taught me. But afterwards, or if I made up some ridiculous answer to some of these questions, he never got on stage, oh, well, he didn't have it quite right, here's the truth. He might riff on it, he might answer the question, but I never felt judged or questioned or doubted or diminished in his presence. And that was the gift, the 10 years of traveling. I mean, he took us, if there was pyramids or ruins or anything, we went Teotihuacan every year, we went to the Yucatan, the Mayan things, we went to Honduras, Guatemala, Egypt, Mount Shasta. I mean, he just said, let's go, and off we went. And when I joked about we always need to coming back, that's what I was doing. I was coming back for more of the same, because I hadn't heard it, I didn't get it. And I said to myself, I want that. I want that. When I was doing all the hypnotherapy and counseling, which was very good for me, and very liberating, I knew that I had a wall here between me and the world. I judged, I was afraid, I was suave, I was good, but it was a pretty good act. But I knew that there was still this separation between myself and the magic of this universe. And I was hoping he'd knock down the wall and save me. Oh, a man of power. Oh, right, good, I can be saved here. But looking back, I realized that the best he could do was chip a little hole in the wall and pass me some tools. And I had to use the tools to knock down the wall from the inside. And that's become pretty much the focus of my teaching and my sharing is, number one, to the best of my ability, and constantly checking to make sure that is the best, to reflect back the beauty that I see. And you are a beautiful assemblage, individually and collectively, and I love that. And also to offer tools that we can all use to clean the garbage that's in here, so that we can have the tools to take the garbage out to free ourselves to be as present and connected as we possibly can. One of the first kind of spiritual teachers I ever heard was an LP of somebody, I think it was called Bupa Freejon.
Yes.
Anybody know Bupa Freejon?
Baba
Freejon? Yeah. And the only thing I remember from that is he said, I can't take your garbage out, but I can tell you where your garbage is. It's in that brown paper sack over there with grease spots on it, but you have to take out your garbage. And that was one of my first little things I filed away and said, I get that. I can't be saved, but I can be offered tools I can be shown where the garbage is, and I can be shown where the dumpster is, and I can, if I have the intention, if I have the desperation, the willingness, I can take that garbage and throw it in the dumpster. And of course another bag pops up, and another, and another, and another. And that's part of the process. And because we all come from a different start, we all have different garbage, different baggage that we're carrying in the world. The more intense our childhood was, the harder it was on us, the more afraid we were, the more agreements we made that we weren't good enough, that we weren't worthy of love, that we weren't safe. And the more of those kind of beliefs and agreements color now our adult world, the more garbage we have to take out. But fortunately, there's no hierarchy of value in my world of who's ahead of who, of who's done the most work and is the clearest. We're all in this together. And there is no goal even.